Hello there, welcome back to the Prisoner Press. My name is Brady G. You're listening to one of the last true, reliable radio shows that you can count on. We're not corporately funded, we're completely independent, and we're completely dedicated to bringing you the truth, whatever the cost. And trust me when I say that in society today, that cost is extremely pricey. We're starting a new series here where honestly, I felt compelled to talk about this because it literally has an impact on all of our everyday lives when we talk about this power structure. Now I've outlined it here on this, I'll put it up on the screen here on this document where I talk about the power structure that ranges from Satan, and then it splits into different categories like human slaves of the Illuminati, they call them. They work for the shadow government, for the deep state, whatever you want to call them. There's different labels that conspiracy theorists put on them. There's reptilians and aliens, which we're going to be talking about today in this installment. There's Bilderbergers, bankers, George Soros type people, and then we split into these tiny categories that have the least control over the masses. However, they're still part of this power structure. We talk about the Catholic Church, we talk about national leaders, intelligence agencies, media magnates, your CNN, your MSNBC. We talk about higher education, we talk about the military, tech, Google, big companies, big pharma, things like that. They're all working for the same goal: to enslave the world to a new Chinese communist-style system, implementing a one-world government, implementing a one-world religion. All of this will come to pass shortly. But today, let's talk about these reptilian creatures that run the world from behind the scenes, that people like to label you a crazy fool or a crazy conspiracy theorist for even discussing. However, they have been completely misunderstood by some, and we talk about Nephilim, and we talk about gray aliens, and we talk about all kinds of creatures. In fact, throughout antiquity, there's been mention of so many different types of creatures that they've all been given their individual mythos. They've all been given their own origin stories, their own histoires, per se. However, they all have unhuman abilities. It's clear they're not humans. It's clear that they're hybrids because they can function in our society to a certain extent. However, each of these creatures and each of these, in fact, groups and subgroups on the power structure, they're all dots on a canvas, if I could let you think about that. And in this series, it's our goal to connect those dots because frankly, they are so tight-woven and tight-knit into our society that they have insane control and insane power over you and your everyday life. So in order to talk about the reptilians, let's go back to the very beginning of life itself, to the beginning of everything, the beginning of the universe, and talk about this in its simplest form. So for the reptiles in their simplest form, there is a race of reptilian or alien shapeshifters that are blending into society for their secret agenda. That is, of course, to give rise to the Antichrist. However, they don't really blend in, do they? Because we look at pictures of Hillary Clinton, we look at pictures of Barack Obama, and frankly, something is just not right there. They're not quite human. They're not quite normal. They're not quite like you and I. There's something completely evil and sinister about them, and there's something completely vile because behind the scenes they're really a monster that has taken on human form to fool you. It's sickening how they take advantage of the masses. I can't go off on too many tangents or this will be hours long. And these reptilians, you might have heard David Icke talk about them. You might have heard a lot of people on the internet talk about them. However, they never quite go far enough to complete the story, and they never quite connect the dots fully to give you a real, true understanding of what exactly we're dealing with. The reptilians, they feed off of the spread of Satanism and evil in the world, and they feed off suffering, and they require human sacrifices and fetal sacrifices and blood rituals and pedophilia and children rituals where kids are involved. And we talk about pedophilia, which I just talked about in a video just a couple days ago, because these sick freaks require the taking advantage of children and using their suffering to give them self-power and life in order that they can shapeshift and slip interdimensionally and go from point A to point B, which is not necessarily travel. People get it confused with space travel. However, in reality, they're switching from the third dimension, which we're in now, to the fourth, which is the dimension where they peacefully and comfortably abide. In our society, they're always working to blend in their society. They can be them true selves, put their feet up, and relax. So in the beginning of time, right after the creation story in the book of Genesis in the Bible, and if you want to look into this yourself, look at Genesis 6. However, I'm going to be reading from Enoch. Enoch is a book that didn't make it into the Bible. However, it is still reliable information because, of course, different books in the Bible do mention it, and it is from the same time period and ultimately from the same sources as the Bible. So it didn't make it into the canon version of the Holy Bible. However, we do take its information as true. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to this deed, and alone I shall have to pay for the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him, and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon the plan, but to do this thing. Then they swear all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And there was 200 of them. And they all descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. So let's talk about this scene here. This is angels in heaven, who are literally at the right hand of God, and they decide to go against God and do something that they knew God would have a huge problem with, and that is go down and have sex with human women. Now, they went down to Mount Hermon, which is in the South Pole. So they descended from heaven to the South Pole, and then they spread out on the earth, and they found women. And next in the text it says, Then they took wives, each choosing for itself, whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabited, teaching them sorcery, incantations, and dividing the roots and the trees. They came down, they found women, and they were forced to shapeshift. Because they don't look like us. They're not humans, but they can shapeshift into some of the most attractive individuals that you've ever seen. This is their ability. They can blend in by looking super attractive, seducing the women, having sex with them, and ultimately impregnating them. And at the same time, they're teaching humans the evil, mystical arts, sorcery, witchcraft, science that they shouldn't have discovered yet, time travel, drugs, all different things they taught humans that God never intended for us to know. And the women conceiving brought forth giants. The women gave birth to these Nephilim. Giants is the English word for the Nephilim. And the Nephilim, here's the truth. This is going to startle you. The Nephilim are this hybrid that we see in the power structure today, whose stature was 300 cubits. The giants, they were 300 cubits. They devoured all which the men produced until it became impossible to feed them, when they turned themselves against men in order to devour them, and began to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood, their flesh one another. These hybrids, these Nephilim, these reptilians, they not only do they drink the blood of humans, particularly children, because they get the most energy and the most rejuvenation off of it, but they also consume the flesh. They're also involved in, I'll do cannibalism, but it's not technically cannibalism because they're not humans like us. They eat humans, particularly babies, particularly unborn fetuses, which of course is one of the reasons we see the rise of abortion so prominent in society today. Impiety increased, fornication multiplied, and they transgressed and corrupted all their ways. Amazarach taught all the sorcerers and dividers of the roots. Armers taught the solution of sorcery. Barkiel taught the observers of the stars. Akabil taught signs. Tamiel taught astronomy. And Azaradel taught the motion of the moon. All things that humans are not supposed to know. We see people that are obsessed with horoscopes and following the stars. Of course, that's one of the evil mystical arts that the fallen angels, through their offspring, the Nephilim, taught humans. And men being destroyed cried out, and their voice reached to heaven. First of all, I have to get this straight. The fallen angels, the original ones that came down to Mount Hermon from heaven, they are not the Nephilim. The Nephilim, or from here on out we'll call them reptilians, because that's the popular buzzword today, or any other creatures that ancient mythos talk about roaming the earth and still roaming the earth today, they are simply the ones that the fallen angels gave birth to. And by gave birth to, I mean through a human women host. They came down from heaven, which is not necessarily a space above us. They talk about heaven being in the sky, but it's not in the sky. It's in a different dimension. They slipped into ours. They had sexual relations with human women. And I know that talking about all these dimensions, particularly any dimension higher than number 3, confuses people, but let's just leave the explanation watered down and at the fact that there's an infinite amount of dimensions right now all happening simultaneously, and thank God for his grace that we can only access 3 of them, which is 3 too many for us to wrap our brains around, frankly. And this dimensional talk, by the way, this really does speak to the fact that there is spiritual warfare going on around us at all times. There is spiritual battles being fought right in front of you, and this is why it's so important to become a spiritual prayer warrior. You know, I posted this series on YouTube called Unlocking the Spiritual Tools of Yeshua. Well, folks, in this modern day and age, in this sinister world that we live in that is in peril today, it is the most important time to use those tools as ever. Now, people do breed controversy over who exactly the Nephilim were after this passage and who they are today. Particularly, like I just said, they get confused with fallen angels. However, also they get it confused with aliens and greys and things like that. But I believe, and this has been something that I've uncovered through all my research over many years, I believe that the Nephilim, or Nephilim, some people call them, I believe that they shed some light on another ancient myth that people like to talk about quite a bit if you're in these circles, and it's rather nefarious in nature, called the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki represent the deities of the ancient Mesopotamians, and they were gods worshipped by the Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Akkadians. Now, we know they weren't really gods, they were human-angel hybrids. However, of course, mortals are quick to call anything gods. Look at how much people use their cell phones. Look at artificial intelligence. Look at the rise of this sinister, evil crap coming up today. All of that, people are looking at like a god, and just like that, the Sumerians and the Babylonians looked at the Nephilim as gods. So with this origin story from the Bible of the fallen angels and the Nephilim, we're connecting the dots of the reptilians, Anunnaki, the greys, aliens. People talk about aliens coming to their bedroom at night. It's not from outer space, folks. It's from another dimension. They're interdimensional beings that slip into our reality and feed off your suffering and feed off your sinister Satanism and feed off all things evil, all things that God despises. They feed off it. That's the truth. That's the fact of the matter that we live in. They taught all of the evil arts. They deceived everybody, and most notable, of course, they shapeshift and they slip interdimensionally. This is their trademark signature. They can slip in and out of dimensions. That's the type of stuff that we hear about when we talk about paranormal activities. We talk about ghost stories, alien stories, UFOs, all this stuff, Bigfoot even, anything like this. These creatures, these beings are slipping interdimensionally, and when they slip interdimensionally, they're not shape-shifting already, so you see them in their truest form. And we've seen slip-ups, we've seen reptilians in the background, we've seen time travelers, we've seen all sorts of evidence of UFOs. All of this is prior to their shape-shifting, after they interdimensionally slipped into the third dimension where you and I reside. The Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the Greys, and whatever other conspiracy theory you want to put in here, Bigfoot, fill in the blank with whatever you want. They all come from another planet in the fourth dimension, okay? People say they come from another planet in our dimension. However, this is not true. They don't space travel to Earth, okay? They come from their planet to our planet interdimensionally, okay? And their planet is so far undiscovered. However, in recent news, I've seen that another planet has been discovered that could possibly be their home planet of Nibiru. Okay? Nibiru. Nibiru is on a long orbit around the Earth, and when it did come by the Earth so quickly, what did that cause? Well, what happens when a giant rock comes past our gravitational pull with their own gravitational pull? Massive influx of tides. This is how we had the giant great flood that the Bible talks about with the story of Noah. And what did God promise Noah after the flood? They would never flood the earth again. So Nibiru is never going to fly by the earth like that again. But Nibiru is where the Nephilim hang out in their homeland. Now, they weren't born there. People say they were born there and they came to Earth and stuff like this. They weren't born on Nibiru. They reside there. They travel there into their dimension, probably to get a relief from paying attention to what's going on in our dimension right here, because it could be overwhelming for them. So the fallen angels came down, had sex with human women, gave birth to the hybrid reptilians. And people called them giants because they've never seen somebody so tall. Then they proceeded to teach humans all of the evil and mystical arts. They used human beings for their own purposes. The gravitational tides caused by their planet's close proximity to ours created the Great Flood. And when Yahweh allowed their planet Nibiru to slip interdimensionally just once, just past us. And if they do never discover Nibiru, I do believe that it's because Nibiru doesn't exist in the third dimension. I believe it exists in the fourth dimension, and that's why scientists haven't discovered it. Because according to writings, Nibiru is in the solar system. So why can't they discover this planet? Frankly, it's because it's in the fourth dimension as far as I'm concerned. And people believe that all the Nephilim and the Reptilians were wiped off the face of the earth during the Great Flood. However, as we've talked about in previous transmission, it seems most likely that the Nephilim DNA survived the Great Flood through the bloodline of one of Noah's sons' wives. Because if you remember who was taken on the ark from humanity, it was Noah, his kids, and his kids' wives. And his kids' wives were not from the bloodline of Noah, so they may have had alien reptilian DNA in them, and then they were able to pass that bloodline on, and that's how we still have these reptilian shapeshifters here today. Because mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, they are here today. And because of this, because of the scrutiny to them, they've went into hiding. Some of them on Nibiru, some of them here, but the ones that are here are working for the sinister plan of corrupting the people and bringing on the rise of the Antichrist. Let's go back to Enoch 19 and talk about what they're doing today. And then Uriel said, "Here the angels who cohabited with women appointed their leaders, and being numerous in appearance made men profane and caused them to err." And caused them to err is simply saying led them astray and caused them to be manipulated. So the men have turned evil because of the information that the reptilians have given them and because of the reptilians that have posed as them. "For in the great day there shall be judgment, with which they shall be judged until they are consumed, and their wives also shall be judged, who led astray the angels of heaven, that they might salute them. And I, Enoch, I alone saw the likeness of the end of all things, nor did any human being see it as I saw it." This speaks to the power structure, ladies and gentlemen. With their shape-shifting manipulations in the stature of politics, business, and finance, they have been able to, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, corrupt the population until the ultimate judgment that is to come. And I believe that ultimate judgment is coming rather soon because of the world events and prophecy that's leading up to this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the truth. People are going to say I'm absolutely crazy for saying this. People are going to say that I am a conspiracy theorist and a tinfoil hat wearing fool. But what I'm telling you, this is what you don't understand. It's in the Bible. And the Bible has been so watered down today, especially with the rise of this new Reformation movement, apostolicism. We're talking about people that are, oh, God is so good and happy and joy and love and peace. And what they don't understand is right now there is sinister warfare going on that is costing lives, that evil is infiltrating every single facet of society, and people aren't paying attention to it. And right in front of you, there's children being used as sex slaves and food, and their blood is being used as wine for these satanic rituals that are feeding these reptilians. And nobody cares. All they care about is joy to the world. The Lord is come. People, wake up. Do not be idolatrous towards conspiracy theories, but have your eyes open to what God has ordained to be written in His Word. Why do you ignore the stuff that you can't research or you think you don't have time to research and skip to verses like "in the beginning" and skip to verses like "for God so loved the world" and skip to verses like "grace and peace to you, I, Paul, an apostle of Christ," and skip to verses like David whining in a 20-verse psalm? Not that there's not a time and a place for all this, people. There is, but there's also a time and a place for you to use your brains and pay attention to what's going on and the implications. The Bible is not just an ancient text that talks about things that happened thousands of years ago. God ordained it to be timeless, that today it would still free us from this slavery, that it would still free us from this evil, and that this handbook for our life would be the ultimate field guide to spiritual warfare and to dealing with this evil power structure that's happening all around us. And then people say that you're crazy for believing in the reptilians. People say that you're crazy for thinking that there's anything other than humans on this world, that aliens are crazy. Yeah, thinking that aliens are coming from other planets of the galaxy, and then maybe, I don't know, God wouldn't have mentioned that in His Bible if there was going to be aliens coming to Earth from other planets. Don't you think He might have mentioned that? But what He does mention is these interdimensional child molesters coming for your kids. Stand up with me. Stand up for what's right and what you believe in. This is our only hope. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're going to be going through this power structure from top to bottom. We're going to be talking about George Soros. We're going to be talking about Google. We're going to be talking about Apple. We're going to be talking about the Pope. We're going to be talking about so much more things that are intertwined and manipulating your life that you may not be aware of, that you need to be. And I'm so honored and blessed for those of you that have supported us on this mission this far, because all people around me are being silenced and censored, and so far we're unscathed. As of today, I can't promise anything for tomorrow. Have a good weekend, ladies and gentlemen. It's Friday. We upload Monday to Friday on this radio show, prisonerpress.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, whatever else you got us on. Prisoner Press, prisonerpress.com.